If you're here, you know that you're here for the Mac and Mike commentary. This being our first show, Mike and I thought we'd introduce you to ourselves and why you might want to listen to the things that we want to talk about. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. Some of it will be news of the day. Some of it will be things, general topics, specific topics that we just feel like need a little bit of explanation. But today we're going to talk about ourselves. Why you should watch, maybe why you should care about our opinions. So I'll tell you, my nickname is Mac. I earned the nickname Mac in the military. My last name is McCormick, so naturally it was Mac. I was born in the 50s, so I'm in my 60s. I lived through some very, very good times in the United States of America. I remember Leave It to Beaver and Gilligan's Island when it was the first run show. I remember Father Knows Best and My Three Sons. So you understand the America that I grew up in. At age 18, I married my high school sweetheart and joined the military. Full disclosure, age 18 in the 70s was a whole lot older than 18 is today. So I've been through a lot in my life. My wife and I had 6 children. We had a couple of miscarriages. We actually had 7 children. My first son died in infancy. And during that period of time, I got mad at everybody. Got mad at God, got mad at the world, got mad at medicine, got mad at my wife, got mad at everybody. That was a very traumatic time. 2 miscarriages, one of which we know was a boy, and the other we don't know the sex of. But that left me with 6 children, one of which was a handicapped child. My son was afflicted with Cornelia-Dulang syndrome, and nobody knows what Cornelia-Dulang syndrome is, but I will tell you that it's about 10 times more rare than Down syndrome. It is a genetic disorder, and my son Jeffrey was significantly mentally and physically handicapped. But I will tell you, with his handicap, he was a bundle of joy, a bundle of love, and I learned a lot from my son. He taught me a lot. A few years ago, both my wife and my son passed away in a terrible accident. And so Alan McCormick, nicknamed Mac, joined the military, spent 24 years in the Army Reserve, was a dad, husband. I'm very, very proud of my children. And maybe throughout these videos, I'll drop a little bit of information about who those people are, who they've become, and why I'm so very proud of. I like to tell people I only found one thing I was good at: being a dad. Get your mind out of the gutter. I was proud of being a dad. So I spent 24 years in the military and was a commander of a unit in Operation Desert Storm. So there's a lot of experience there in my 60 plus years of life, including sadness, despair. I know darkness. Hello, darkness, my old friend. As we like to say, I've been there and I've done that, and I've got the marks to prove it, or I got the T-shirt before I came home. So why you should listen to me and to my opinion, I don't know. I guess you'll figure that out for yourself. But I will tell you that those many years as a dad, many years in the military, I was faced with some very significant and important decisions, both personal and professional. Outside of the military, I worked in communications and technology, worked a long time in sales, also worked for the government for a short period of time. I will tell you, working for the government is not one of my favorite things to do. I will tell you that in the government, bureaucracy wears on you. But I'm fortunate enough to be born in the greatest country in the world. It's like hitting the lottery living in America. I can tell you that both through my military and civilian life, I've been in a lot of places in this world, and there's no place like the good old USA. So I will tell you that if you visit here frequently, you'll find out more about Mac, who I am, what my opinion is. And during this time, as you come visit us here, you're going to hear us talk about several topics, things I like to refer to as the vagaries and absurdities of life. It appeals to me when I see something that just doesn't make sense, that my mind needs to react to it and needs to investigate it. I often say that if something doesn't make any sense, it's because you don't have all the ingredients of what the equation is that justifies the. When we talk about vagaries and absurdities, I'll give you an example of an absurdity. When I was a younger man, in the 70s, there was this artist named Tiny Tim who sang this song using a ukulele called Tiptoe Through the Tulips. You can look it up, Google it, it's hilarious. But Tiny Tim, not the Tiny Tim from the story that you read as a youngster about Christmas, but rather Tiny Tim who sang Tiptoe Through the Tulips, was an absurdity. He was a caricature of a comedian of a funny story. It was a joke, yet he made a lot of money at it. It was an absurdity. So you're going to hear us talk about a lot of different things. I'm going to let Mike introduce himself.
Yeah, well, thanks, Alan. I'm Mike Kelly, born on St. Patrick's Day in 1958 in New York City. I spent 12 years there being raised by my grandparents. And at age 12, I got sent to a boys' home in Pennsylvania for kids from broken homes. They were getting just a little bit too old to take care of me. And my brother was a bit of a hellion of the 60s, doing a lot of acid and violating the law and a lot of bad things. So they separated us. At 16, I left the boys' home. I was an honor student. But because of the abuse at the boys' home, I left the boys' home. I dropped out of high school. And at 16, I ran off with a 21-year-old girl, and I thought that was great. Of course, you can imagine how that worked out. It didn't last too long, about a year and a half. I started to get my act back together and moved back from Florida to Pennsylvania and got a job, got my GED, started going to college, and while I was in college, United Parcel Service offered me a full-time job making big bucks. So I slipped out of college for the money, and after a couple years of that, I decided it was killing me. So I joined the Air National Guard. 3 years later, at age 25, I went active duty Air Force with that particular unit. Spent 22 years, 8 months, 11 days. People like to know how I know that because it's on my DD-214. And because I was just back from Afghanistan, they weren't letting people go from my career field. So they put me on stop loss. And that's what gave me the 8 months, 11 days, or I would have gone out at 22 years. After that, I opened my own business. I'm sure we'll talk about my military career at other times. But I opened my own web development business, and I got into marketing and advertising, and then political consulting and business consulting. And over the years, I've given a lot of thought to everything. I'm sort of a philosopher by nature. I like to ask questions. I don't have all the answers. I have opinions, and I try to express them as opinions and not as stated facts unless I'm absolutely sure that they are stated facts, because our integrity is important. That pretty much sums up who I am. I'm not sure if you want to talk about how we met.
How did we meet, Mike? Because I'm not sure I remember.
Well,
it was a good thing.
Yeah, it was during the 2018 primary election for the Republican Party here in Pennsylvania. You were working for Wagner, and I was working for Mango as a political consultant. So we were on the opposite side, but we were both conservative guys. And you had discovered that I wanted to work to help veterans. And at the time, you were heading up Concerned Veterans for America in the state of Pennsylvania.
That's true.
And
yeah, and I would just remark here that my guy won the primary election, not friendly rivals. Mike and I look at things differently. One of the reasons why I suggested to Mike that we do this particular podcast, or whatever it is that we're video podcast, is I tend to look at things from a very 30,000 foot view. I tend to look at the big picture. Mike is much better with the details. Mike Mike studies things and he learns things and he shares things. I might fly by the seat of my pants a little bit more than he does. But I think Mike called us conservatives. I think that's true, but I think I'm also a classic liberal. I believe in things that our founders thought when they created this nation. I believe absolutely in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe, as I mentioned to you earlier, the greatest country in the world. I've been to some places where they wish they could be in the United States of America. In the United States of America, we rank our poor based on how many TVs they have or how many cars they have or whether or not they have air conditioning in their house. I've been to places in the world where there's not enough water, that they work all day just to get enough water to drink. I've been to places where people live in blue tarps stretched over shipping containers or shipping pallets. And that's just not the United States of America. If I could do one thing for kids in America when they graduated high school, I would make it a mandatory assignment of a 3 or 6 month living period of time in a truly poor country so that they would understand how good we have it in the United States of America. And during the many and various podcasts that we're going to do, I'm sure we'll talk about some of those things. But, one of the things that Mike and I collectively bring is that breadth of experience that says, I've done this and I've done that and I lived this and I had to make these decisions. And some of the decisions I've made were good ones. Some of the decisions I've made were not so good ones. And I hope through my experience, much like I try to teach my children, I think that those people that watch these podcasts will learn a little bit from us. For example, Mike tells me stories about living in a boys' home. That's not an experience I had, but yet I've learned from him. Maybe you care to share a couple of the experiences that you had. I know that living in a boys' home was different than the loving family I grew up in.
Well, I think that could be a whole episode. The one thing that I would stress about a boys' home environment is there is, depending on what age you are when you go in, your intellectual level, your physical appearance, you're going to get bullied both intellectually and physically, and you have to learn how to take care of yourself. And there's a lot I have to say about that, but all in all, I came into it with a good basis, I think, of how to treat people. And the one thing I learned is if it was within my power to defend somebody getting beat up intellectually or physically, I would do my best to step in and stop it. Now, obviously, you don't get yourself into the middle of a brawl where you can't handle it either intellectually or physically, but it caused me to be maybe a bit of an overachiever. So whether or not I succeeded, I strived to become smart and physically strong. And that's how I ended up in special operations. And because it required both brains and brawn in my job. But that's a story for another episode.
See, I learned similar things to the story that Mike just told when I joined the military. I went to basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey in the summer of 1973. Well, that was at the tail end of the Vietnam War. The draft was ending, although I had a high draft number whenever my number was finally called in 1975. But in 1973, when I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, it was at the tail end of the draft. So we had some people who were draftees, some people who were volunteers. But the important thing was that we had every slice of society in that military unit. We had white men and black men and yellow men and brown men, and we all had to live together. The karate champion of the state of New Jersey was a black man who was in my platoon. Likewise, we had a black man who was from Los Angeles, California, who was familiar with and worked in the movie industry. I remember we had this one guy from Mississippi whose parents owned a Chevrolet dealership. He drove to Fort Dix in a brand new Chevy Corvette. So you every slice of society, rich and poor, strong and weak, every different religion and shape and nationality, and we're forced into organization, a small unit group of people where we lived in the same rooms, in the same space, and we all had to get along. And I will tell you that that's a fantastic life lesson, learning about people, learning how to get along with people. And I value that lesson today. And I think if more people were in a circumstance where they got to learn about one another, whether that was a circumstance that they chose or whether it was a circumstance that they were forced into, I think that absolutely makes a difference in your life.
All right, that sounds good, Alan. I guess that's where we'll just cut it for now, and we'll join you with future episodes about various subjects. We're going to start a website, macandmike.com. It's already up. But we'll take questions in the future. If you want, just drop us a line.
Yeah, please tell us about your vagaries and absurdities of life that you run into. Maybe those will be topics for future conversations.
All right. Thanks for your time.